I'm excited to be launching the first of a quarterly series with schools to discuss readiness, resilience and response during school disruptions. Bounce Readiness was formed to work with higher risk industries to prepare them for any incident or disruption that may occur. Our clients are in the school sector, healthcare, accommodation, public spaces and any organisation needing emergency management, business continuity, critical incident management and crisis management. I've been working with schools for many years and passionate about building resilience in the school space. As such, we've started this quarterly series to speak with schools across Australia in relation to what experiences they've had during incidents, what's worked well, and any lessons learned they can share with others.
Cheryl, this has been a year unlike any other. After 25 years or more in this kind of work, nothing really prepared me for what I experienced. There are critical incidents, but this hasn't been a critical incident. It's been rolling, grueling experience of sustained pressure. And we had to work out what's the best way to respond. So we took a lens around safety and risk. And we looked at, if you will, where the needle, if you take the metaphor of the fire danger, how do we keep the needle as low as we can around risks and security, but at the same time recognising that actually a school should do what it can to be a school, to be together. You've got three different types of stakeholders: the children, of course, primarily, the staff, and then the community. And the community then has two subsets: the broader community, who may or may not be connected to the school, but also the staff. So we had to look at the if you will, the fire danger calibre for all of those stakeholders. So we decided, instead of the fashionable word is pivot, but we've tried to be more agile than just simply pivot, which implies that you've got one foot on the ground and swinging around. So we've tried to actually turn what is at the end of the day an unprecedented year of challenge and turn it into something that's not about reaction, but about getting in front of a decision to make us thrive. Somehow or other, in the context of risk, there's thriving. And we think it's possible to manage safely, but also to thrive. So we actually reinvented the whole year. We changed around the academic program. We reduced the amount of time that was not face-to-face in the online space to about 5 weeks. And we pulled time from later in the year and moved it forward. So if you will, almost paid it forward, with the view to keeping everybody clear, giving clear direction, anticipating as well as we can within guidelines and government advice what the schools should do, and becoming a trusted, as much as any system and institution can, a trusted source of information about what's happening next. And the meta-narrative around that is the thriving of every life that's in our care. So our children need to be together. They crave being together. The online space worked, and we did a lot of research on its effectiveness and learned a lot in that process. But in the final analysis, the feedback from the students and parents was that children want to be together. How do we make sure that that occurs, and what systems do we set up to make that achievable? So we have done a lot of things, but I've found myself speaking on camera far more than I've ever done. I've found the need to communicate needs to be diverse, use not just one method. Text, visual, audio, podcast, webcast, as many of the strategies as you can to keep people informed in a timely way, so that they rely on the school being the source of truth rather than the rumour mill and the social media impact. The other thing is to have this clear narrative. What is the school trying to do? So that as you're doing it, parents can say, yes, that's consistent with what the school's been saying about itself all this time. There has been some anxieties. Some of our families have had more risks than others. There are more issues around managing health and we've needed to be responsive to that. The other area that has emerged very strongly in my consciousness, probably the strongest that in the long history of this kind of work in different schools, is awareness of staff mental health. Not physical health and not even the normal areas of risk management around physical safety. That's all important and doesn't change, but it's actually their wellness. And it became very clear to me that the more effort we put into staff wellness, the better the school thrived. And it almost, it's like the face mask dropping down in an aeroplane. Back in the days we could take you ride in an aeroplane, and that you put it on the caregiver first. And to some extent we've tried to approach the prospect of thriving in 2020 more about caring for the caregiver and equipping and enabling them to act safely to fulfil the school's objectives academically. We've needed to work very carefully with the board, who bear, of course, the primary statutory risk. So that work has involved careful communication, telling people as it is, and then seeking advice. People in my role tend to think that we've got all the answers, and people often expect us to have all of the answers, but we've learned to make sure that we take other people on the journey and gather up as much advice from the governing body as we can possibly get. We've established a subcommittee of the governing body to specifically look at this. There's a COVID committee, if you will, on the staff, but we also have an equivalent one on the governing body. And we've had to reorganise our finances this year, the billing periods, how we're supporting families who find themselves through no fault of their own in financial needs. How do we manage risk? How do we make sure that the school is a safe place for our operation to occur? The governors play a very important role in that, and even more important than any normal year. It is not business as usual. There are elements of business as usual, but that's not the metaphor. The metaphor is actually how do we turn these events into an occasion to thrive, not survive, not just cope, but actually become stronger. And the story is still being told. The next 12 months involves a new set of challenges. I think there are three. The first is how do we make sure that the findings from this pandemic translate into real reform? What's worth keeping and what should be shed? There is a desire to return to the normal. We don't quite know what that will be, and I don't want to lose this opportunity. The second is to balance need and purpose. Financial need will continue, but many of our families have experienced highly disruptive impact on their income and their own sense of financial security. A school needs to be mindful of that. And then the third area is to look over the horizon. So the planning for the next 12 months actually needs to anticipate what this city and this nation will need in 2030, not 2021. And how do we prepare best for that? So take the long view and take the opportunities that are now in front of us, which chiefly in a low interest rate environment, where there is a need to stimulate activity and provide confidence and security for families. Don't be timid. Press on, and press on particularly now with that longer horizon in mind. To get those three things to work, that's in concert, that's going to be quite a challenge.
Okay, so very early on, the head established a critical response team. This team's remained constant and consistent throughout the year. That brings additional experience with the staff as they deal with things that come up from time to time. Each member of the team brought specific expertise and confidence, as much as you can have confidence in areas that you're not necessarily dealt with before, energy, and everyone works incredibly well together. We found that people have got into a pattern of things. We know where people are working and the things that they're responsible for. So the right people were in the room right from the beginning, and that level of experience has been particularly important. It allowed us to make informed decisions and to work holistically as a team, and that's been probably the most important thing. And that whole process continues to be of incredibly high quality. One of the key aspects has been the communication between those team members, that we're able to work through specific scenarios, look to each other for guidance, but also to workshop through everything that's been done. We've tried to remain consistent, as I said, and be comprehensive in everything that we have been able to do, and clearly define where the parameters are that people are working within. We spent a lot of time carefully reviewing our communication before it was sent out to the stakeholders within the school. There have, of course, been challenges to the school as we've responded to everything that's gone on to date throughout the health crisis. Early on, particularly early on, the conflicting advice that we were receiving from the various arms of government and legislative bodies, that was hard to reconcile exactly what it was we were supposed to be doing, that those agencies wanted us to be doing, particularly where we had instances where the material might have been in direct conflict with what was being asked from one to the other. So there was a lot of time spent synthesising the information that was coming to us to make sure that we had the gist of it, and I guess to look to prioritise it and get that level of priority as to what the people were asking us to do. Staying abreast of the information in a rapidly changing environment was really challenging, because it was obviously the news cycle was almost constant throughout. So ensuring that we weren't missing updates, that was a really challenging part of the whole process, so that we're able to properly consider it, but then communicate it out to other people who it was directly affecting. Trying to stay ahead of the game in every sense was our number one priority in many ways. Our community was looking to us for guidance, our community was looking to us for leadership, and so we needed to try and stay ahead of all that was being communicated to us. This helped to alleviate both staff and student anxiety if we could get that information early, and provided and developed a level of trust, and that was really important within the stakeholders across all aspects of our community. Certainly when we were coming out of lockdown, and there was a heightened degree of anxiety around what it was going to be like mixing with people again. That was a really important time, and it was evident that our staff and parent population in particular, again, were looking to us for that leadership and clear and concise communication. Not only were we talking the talk, but we were walking the talk in terms of implementing the protocols that we had communicated out to say, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, and here's the evidence of it being done. That was really, really important. As the months have worn on, there's been increasingly challenged not just to ward off the COVID fatigue, that is all the changes in people's lifestyles around the health crisis, but the danger that there was a complacency associated, and that came along with that fatigue, that it all just got a little bit too hard, can get a little bit too hard in those kinds of ways. So we're ensuring that in spite of COVID, we're continuing to establish the new normal and processing that in alignment with the school strategy to keep everybody safe. And we're keeping our minds on our operational requirements and the strategic vision of the school, even though we are immersed in an additionally complex layer that's come about as a result of the COVID health emergency. So ensuring that there was an integration between the critical incident management team and the business continuity, that was a real challenge, and has been since the start of this. As such, ensuring that those who are on the critical incident team and those in the key roles throughout the school, that we had to have a succession plan, so that in the event that somebody became unwell or they were unable to attend to various aspects of their work, we had other plans in place. And while there was a reliance on individual experience, we needed to ensure that all the decisions were documented so that anybody could pick it up right from the start and continue on with the work that had been done. we had to put a number of things in place to try and alleviate those challenges, not just let them overwhelm us. So to provide a certain level of stability and to bring a positive outcome to a really difficult situation, the school deliberately reimagined the terms that the staff and students that were here, that we, in the peak of the health lockdown, that we were able to actually say, we'll stay away, we'll reimagine, we'll change our term dates, and just to alleviate some of that pressure. That provided more potential face-to-face learning, a greater sense of normality, and gave time off work when the levels and the levels of cases and the level of anxiety was at its highest. And that was really aimed at assisting our students primarily, but of course also our staff in their overall well-being and overall well-being, I should say, and how they were able to then continue in as normal a way as they possibly can. We're able to minimise the impact on staff and maximise the learning outcomes for the kids. And that was pretty drastically affected by remote learning, as we would have seen, not just here, but across the country. The health checks that we've had in place since students and staff have returned to school, they were initially done daily, but we're now doing them twice weekly, and we continue to do that. So we've had that in place since we returned on the 11th of May. That's not only to provide safety protocol and temperature checking and hand sanitising, but also to serve as a reminder, a visual reminder, as everybody enters the school premises on the day that the testing is done, that we're continuing to be mindful of what's in place with the health emergency around all the COVID protocols, that although it is now been some months since all this started, we're still mindful, we're still continuing to work in a proactive manner to ensure that our community stays as safe as possible. It's also been a really lovely way of connecting with the students and the staff as they've come in every day to say good morning. We've obviously been unable to gather as a school community, and within schools that's a really, really important thing. We've been unable to gather in that way with assemblies or chapels or any other kind of large gathering. So to be able to personally greet students and staff as they've come in every day has been a lovely and unintended and unexpected bonus of all of this. The critical incident team have been so fortunate to have a good sense of camaraderie, and that has developed. We spent a lot of time together in the early part of this, and that sense, as I mentioned earlier, of teamwork, but the camaraderie that we are working together towards a common goal is really important. The challenges that we face are serious, and we don't make any light of that, but the good humour that people have been able to bring to it has made the work go through that little bit easier. There's been an increased focus, particularly after the initial onset of the health emergency and the realisation that this was going to be quite a time. There's been an increased awareness around the wellbeing of both students and staff, everyone associated with this, also the parents. It's impacted upon everyone. We're trying to communicate as effectively and as often as we can about the resources that are available, providing time to talk with one another and communicate in a normal way as best we can. Where we are able to open things up to bring it back to what would have looked like in any school community in a non-health emergency time, we're trying to do that as proactively as we can. But we're meeting with our heads of department, with all the heads of various areas as regularly as we can, just taking the time to talk and see how people are going, and that's a really important part of it. One area that we've had a tremendous amount of positive feedback from the stakeholders, our broader community, has been around our communication strategy. As I mentioned earlier, we've put a great deal of time into the communication to try and make it clear and concise and informed, and we've done that by providing a range of communication options. That might be from pieces to camera to newsletters, dedicated pages within the website, which we need to make sure that we update and keep constant. The app alerts, push alerts that are sent out to people. The senior leadership team across the school has made a point of being in front and centre with as much visibility and hands-on experience around this as we possibly can, so that people can see that we're here, we understand what's going on and we're trying to do that as best we can. We hope that the community has felt informed and cared for. We've certainly had feedback that that's been the case, that they've really appreciated the clear and concise decision making and how that's been communicated back to them. We've attempted in all circumstances to ensure that the staff have been informed prior to the community. That's been important in terms of keeping them in the loop and connected to the decisions. In a time of crisis, and this was, I suppose, particularly early on when governments were meeting and making decisions almost hourly, we found that people wanted to be close to the decisions and get those clear and direct messages as that was being communicated to the broader community. We've introduced staff, what we called staff wellbeing pulse checks, where they're asked 4 main questions about their overall wellbeing. How safe do you feel to be here at school? How have they felt that the communication has been, and do they feel that there's adequate support being given to them throughout this time? This has really helped inform how we communicate and areas that we need to focus on if people aren't feeling as well supported as we might hope. The safety protocols that I mentioned earlier have been really well received, and there are a lot of really constant visual reminders there and indications that this is being adhered to and has almost become part of the new normal here at school in terms of simple things, even like around hand sanitising, for example. There are times where complacency or general fatigue has set in, and we've tried to adapt and amend our safety protocols and procedures around that so that they still seem to be important and implemented and in place. Without wanting to be seen to be the absolute world experts on this, just some tips that we found have been really important and helpful to maintain the process moving forward and to keep everyone connected as best we can. The first, and we mentioned this right at the top, the most important thing in many ways is to ensure that we have the right people in that critical response team. The team will be different depending upon what crisis is befalling a community. It's ebb and flow, and it might be that some people move in and out of that team, but to determine who that team is from the start, to make it consistent, to make it constant, is really important. It probably goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, to maintain the calm around it. People will look to leadership teams within any organisation for guidance and leadership, so that sense of calm that you can bring, even if it is quite desperate times or uncertain times, is really important. That sense of careful, calm communication has been one thing that's really come out. Along similar lines is the sense of being visible. Don't make decisions from behind a computer screen. To be out and do as much as you can to be seen to be implementing the directions or changes that you've put in place. Understand that there will always need to be back and forth between when the decision is being made to the stakeholders who it's going out to and getting feedback from them. Now, sometimes that feedback isn't appropriate or can't be acted upon, but the simple act of hearing what's being said, and there are some real gems of information that come back in a lot of instances, perhaps even from sources that you don't necessarily think about in the first place. Keeping a record of what's been going on has been really important. We didn't know how long this was going to take, so the sense that we're able now to refer back to things that happened in late February, look at the decisions that were made, understand that that was done in a considered way, implement changes around those things, but be able to refer back to the record that we had. We can see how we were informed in the past, and that will obviously also inform our decisions as we move into the future. And finally, and importantly, conducting training for those who are involved to build confidence and to help people feel comfortable around it. Even simple things that we saw around our health check stations, just to help people be confident in implementing those health checks that then flowed on to the rest of the community as people came into the gates of the school. So to build that confidence through training has been really, really important.
I started in Barker in January, and straight away I think what's worked well for us during the COVID-19 period has been how we've used a critical incident management plan. This is a plan that was embedded in the school for many years beforehand, and it was clear to me coming into the school that roles, responsibilities were known by senior executive. It was clear that they knew what the plan was, and that really helped us when COVID-19 came along out of the blue and nobody knew it was coming, to have that plan in place. I think another point is they followed the plan very well. It wasn't one of those just pick out the box and we've got a plan. It was actually, there's some discipline around how they made decisions, how they recorded the decisions, which was really, really good. And the part that I take away from this most is, and it's often forgotten, is the communications with staff, as well as the wider Barker community has been good, but with staff, all the decisions they've been making during this journey has been very positive. It's been clear, it's been concise, and that's certainly helped bring staff along with us as the decisions have changed. Coming from a risk background as well, nobody saw COVID-19 coming. If you look at the risk reports around the world, it came out of the blue. So one of the challenges was, yes, we had a critical incident management plan and we tested it, but nobody had really tested it for all of the schools in terms of a pandemic. So straight away we had to revise our pandemic sub-plan. And what was good about that is when we looked at the sub-plan, we were able to see that a pandemic can last up to 18 months plus. There's a first and second wave, and you have to follow health protocols. So briefing the senior exec and team as we went through that process was really beneficial. Risk culture is another point that I'd like just to mention. In a school, all busy teaching, so I've been going around doing risk sessions with different departments, just to get them to understand that it's not a separate thing. It's part of their daily business, and trying to understand where their risks were, be it remote learning or boarding or sports, and that's been really positive. And we have had conflict in information from all the different associations and news, different areas, and that in itself has been challenging, just to work your way through that and then come up with a risk assessment that works. A couple of the challenging areas that come to me straight away would be around boarding. When we had all the boarders away, how do you bring a number of students back, 10, 11 years, 10, 11, 12 back? Do you stagger it? How do you manage that process? And one of the things that we did, apart from the risk assessment, is we created a boarding management plan that was shared with parents and the Barker community and the boarders, and it had responsibilities for what you do as a student, what you do as a parent, and what you do as sort of teaching and boarding staff. Those are the things that we've learned as we've progressed, and they've worked well. As I mentioned at the start, the sub-plan process that we're going through at the moment, so although you have that basic methodology around how you run a critical incident and what roles you have, how you make decisions, the pandemic's been challenging because it's probably something that none of us have rehearsed before. So that's been a challenge, and keeping that, now we've got the plan, keeping that up to date and revising it. Scheduling training with staff is something that we've looked at now as a school. And when I looked at the Aon, I think it was the Independent Schools report, the 2020 report, my pickup on that was that there was only about a third of schools kind of understanding that they need to train staff and test these kind of critical incidents, and that's why Barker has come on the front foot to lead in that, and of course getting an independent into the school to critically assess where we are and not just say, yeah, we're okay, fit for purpose, but does that independent person come in and they will add value and say, actually, you need to look in these different areas. So they're some of the main things, and I think also is sitting back and just assessing where your key risks are. So for us, we want to train fire wardens, we want to train our boarding staff, and some of the things that I've forgotten, we want to train our reception staff that if something happens, how do they answer the phone and run through that? So again, getting Bounce to come in and you to work with us is something that we feel helps us alleviate those challenges. They've been, from my perspective, from what I know, have been very, very positive. An example would be when we rolled out, as I mentioned before, the boarding management plan, the feedback from parents was really, really positive. And I think it was because we were saying, as a school, this is where we are. You know what's happening internationally and nationally, but as a school, these are the things we're going to put in place. So when your students come back, they're going to be briefed, and you're going to be briefed, and we're going to set our expectations around, hygiene and health protocols. And in fact, when the national plan came out, we saw that there was certainly similarities to the one that we'd written. So that's been a positive feedback. Another example was when I was walking down to a health check, a parent pulled up to me in the school and he just said, "Hi, I'm John, what do you do here at Barker?" And I said, "I'm the risk director." And he says, "Oh, good on Barker for thinking about that away from all the teaching syllabus that's going on, that you've actually identified that and you're doing a good job." So I've had personally good feedback, and I think generally staff have, from my perspective, have responded well. When I've been running the risk sessions, when I've been saying this is what we need to do, they've been all very positive. We've identified that we're okay, we're doing a good job, but we do need to look at certain areas. So around extracurricular and those kind of activities, we need to focus some resources. So certainly we're going to be looking in the next 4 to 6 months is identifying where those risks are, and that might be with our outdoor areas, our boarding areas, our emergency response planning inside the school, and then focusing our energy, together with Bounce to find out where do we need to do some work. Where do we need to do some training? And really for me, it's about testing and then learning from the testing, debriefing, and then going back and looking at it. So the next, up until Christmas, we'll be doing some pretty full-on reviewing, training with those key areas, and some really good testing. Leading into next year, we're going to focus a lot more on the critical incident side of the business, working with the senior executive especially, and rolling out and testing it in a tabletop type exercise role about if, for example, our IT goes down or is a power failure or a flood, how are we going to manage that? And then having that independent review process saying, look, you did well in these areas, but these are some areas you might need to fix. And then I see that going forward as a rolling yearly program, reviewing how we're going and testing it on a yearly basis, and not just kind of putting it away and say, we've got that now. How do we actually know it works? So I would say, like myself, haven't worked in an independent school environment, bring in your skill set and your knowledge from banks, where you've worked in banking or government, bring it into the school. I would say that they've been very receptive in some of the experience that I brought from other different areas. Certainly straight away looking at customising, updating your emergency response procedures and your critical incident procedures. Make it as simple as possible. If you can have those two plans combined moving forward, as we are looking to do, make sure that they're in one place, an easy grab, so that you can look at that and say, okay, we know what to do. So there's similarities there. Definitely exercise and test your procedures. Don't just write a plan or a policy and then lock it away. Make sure that you are testing those procedures. The simple things in life, so being an ex-police officer, when there's, say, for example, an emergency that occurs in a place, it could be this school, how good are your communications? And for me, we've just implemented a new radio communications network with a repeater station. So we've got one channel for an emergency channel. If something happens, people can grab that radio from across the board and they can use that to communicate. And from a governance perspective, make sure, as you would do in private industry or government, record the decisions, debrief the decisions, and then learn from those areas that you need to improve on.